start any fires.
So just letting them speak that they don't love it, and for them to know that we heard them express that same sentiment, I think is important. Things that we didn't really have a choice. Todd, how are you? Good to see you.
No. Hey, Tom. This was a really good idea.
All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to tonight's debates for Klamath County Commissioner Position 1, which will start at 7 o'clock tonight, and here in a few minutes for Klamath County Sheriff. We're honored to host these events and provide you, the voters, with an opportunity to hear directly from candidates and to help you make informed decisions in the upcoming election. As we get started, I first want to thank Basin Mediactive and mybasin.com for streaming this debate and providing a recorded version afterwards. The Klamath County Chamber of Commerce takes these debates seriously. We don't endorse specific candidates. We see our role as creating a space for productive dialogue on the issues that matter most to our community. By bringing candidates and voters together, we want to encourage thoughtful civic engagement and strengthen the decision-making process for everyone involved. The Chamber of Commerce is made up of more than 600 businesses. Tonight's debate will address a broad spectrum of topics relevant to the Klamath County's future, including public safety, budgeting, housing, economic development, and more. The questions were created with input from our chamber members, our board of directors, and our government affairs committee. Each candidate will have the chance to present their ideas and solutions, giving you the opportunity to compare their perspectives. With that, I want to introduce the moderator for this first part with the sheriff's debate, our Mr. Joe Spendolini. Joe has been a longtime member of the chamber, served on the board, and has served as the chair and a member of our government affairs committee. Joe, are you ready?
I am. So before we get started, and I'll go into, I know you were given the format for the debate when two of you would be participating. I'll go over the changes now that it's just you. But we did receive a statement from Shane Mitchell, the other candidate running for Klamath County Sheriff. And I want to read this in its entirety, so if you would bear with me. In the upcoming election for sheriff, a debate between the candidates would typically offer an excellent platform to engage with the public on important issues. However, in this particular situation, participation in this debate presents a conflict of interest due to the ongoing legal proceedings involving my opponent and the sheriff's office. The opposing candidate has filed a lawsuit against the sheriff's office, which creates a legal entanglement that makes a fair and impartial debate nearly impossible. Engaging in a public forum alongside an individual actively suing the sheriff's office risks turning the debate from a constructive dialogue about policies into a legally fraught and potentially adversarial encounter. In this context, anything said by either party could be misconstrued or used to influence the lawsuit, placing undue pressure on the sheriff's office and compromising the integrity of both the legal process and the electoral process. Moreover, participating in a debate while litigation is pending could blur the lines between addressing voters' concerns and defending against legal accusations. The risk of breaching legal boundaries is heightened, as statements made during the debate could inadvertently affect the lawsuit or become evidence in court. Given the ethical and legal implications of discussing matters that are part of an active lawsuit in a public forum, it is prudent to refrain from engaging in a debate at this time. Ultimately, while the Sheriff's Office remains committed to transparency and public engagement, protecting the integrity of both the legal system and the election is paramount. And that's signed Shane Mitchell. Now, Mr. Bryson, we're going to give you an opportunity to respond to that, and then I'll get into the rules of our conversation.
Thank you. Everybody hear me? Does it sound like it's very loud?
Yeah, it's not very loud.
Is this any better?
Oh,
There we
yeah.
go. There we
Just
go.
make sure you haven't turned your head, take the microphone with you.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. So, thanks for having me here, and thanks for allowing me to address this. My attorney did advise not to go into details regarding the lawsuit, but I can discuss a couple of things. My opponent has gone to candidate forum since before the primary in May, up to as recently as October 7th, just 2 weeks ago. There hasn't been a conflict until this debate-style forum, the only one like this election cycle. And now there is a conflict? Just to be clear, I'm suing the sheriff personally for him violating my rights as an employee. My opponent simply does not want to sit up here and answer questions in a debate-style setting so as not to show his lack of experience, lack of knowledge, and lack of plans. Priorities are great to have, but he does not have a plan on implementing his priorities. I do. For my opponent to use a lawsuit that he has absolutely nothing to do with, to get out of sitting up here and answering tough questions from you, the voters, should be a clear message to every voter what type of sheriff he would make. When the tough questions come his way, or sensitive issues that are tough to answer or explain, he will simply come up with an excuse to not be present. If there was a conflict for my opponent to be here, why did the county's attorney not address it on behalf of the county? That's how it works. The attorney represents us as employees. My opponent does not have a conflict, and this is a cowardly excuse not to attend. Thanks.
Okay. So we've only got, let's see, what time is it? We got less than an hour before we've got to turn this over to the commissioner debate. So I'm going to ask that you guys refrain from showing your dismay or approval of anything that he says so that we can just march right through this if you're okay with that. I would appreciate it. So let's get into the new rules since it's just you. You're going to have 2 minutes for an opening statement. You'll have 3 minutes for a closing statement. You will have up to 2 minutes to respond to the questions that I present to you. Our timekeeper here in the middle is going to keep you on track and make sure you don't go over the 2 minutes. She'll provide you with a 30-second warning, and then she'll give you a hard stop when you've exhausted the 2 minutes. And at that point, you can finish your sentence, but not your thought. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Do you have
I was
any
confused
questions?
on that thought and sentence.
Oh, gotcha. If you're in the middle of a sentence, finish your sentence, but
Gotcha.
yeah. All right. So if you don't have any other questions, you can proceed with your opening statement, and you've got 2 minutes.
Sure. My name is Bryson. I've lived in the Klamath Basin since 1971. I was about a year and a half old when my folks moved up here. Went all through high school here, or all through school, high school, graduated from Mazama. Started with the Sheriff's Office in late 1995 as a reserve deputy. In 96, I was hired as a full-time corrections deputy. Since 1996, I've held positions of corrections deputy, corrections corporal, patrol deputy, forest deputy, marine deputy, property crimes detective, search and rescue manager, search and rescue coordinator, jail lieutenant, jail captain, operations captain. So as you can see, I've worked in, supervised, or managed every single aspect of the Sheriff's Office. So why is that important? That's important because when you come up through the ranks and you have different positions, you learn things. And in this day and age, when we're looking at our budget stuff, and I'm looking at numbers here that we're going to get into in a little bit, you guys are going to understand why that's important. You need a sheriff that in January comes in and hits the door running. It's not an on-the-job training. You guys, you can't afford it. So we're going to talk about the millions of dollars that this county is going to be upside down in during this forum, and you're going to understand why all of my experience and my knowledge in as deputies, reserves, volunteers, the forest, the marine, all those contracts come into play when it's your safety. That's what we're talking about, is how to take your dollar that you're giving to the commissioners to give to us, and for us to provide the best safety we can for you, okay? So to me, that is being transparent, that's being honest, that's standing up here and asking or answering hard questions. It's doing it out on the street, it's doing it as the sheriff when you come at us later on and say, why are we having layoffs?
Okay, thank you. Can you describe your leadership style and how you would maintain accountability within the sheriff's office?
Well, I think accountability starts at the top and goes down. Okay, so each one of us has accountability to ourselves, and we have accountability to each other. Deputies need to be able to make the decisions. I've told my sergeants over and over again that if a deputy can't make a little decision, they'll never be able to make a big decision. And in our line of work, a big decision is a life and death decision. So they need to be able to make those little decisions. Our supervisors need to allow them to do that. We have a very young staff, both in the jail and on the patrol side. And we have a very young core of sergeants that are frontline supervisors, that they need training. They need to spread their wings and learn as we go along, and they need guidance from their boss, the lieutenants, the captains, and the sheriff. So allowing them to grow, allowing them to make mistakes. We all make mistakes. You just have to accept your mistakes, learn from them, and move on.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to talk a little bit about the budget now. Let me start by saying, as you know, we've got over 6,000 square miles here in Klamath County. Over half of that is actually owned by state and federal government. So there's about 2,500 square miles that the sheriff's patrol has to maintain. When you guys cross into jurisdictions outside the county, like it's state, federal forest, or even some of the, one of the 5 municipalities, and the biggest one is the city of Klamath Falls. And we're going to get into some of the boundaries there and the jurisdictional complications that has created. But within the county, when it comes to public safety, we're not just talking about the sheriff's office. We're talking about the district attorney, juvenile. We're talking about probation, parole. How do you plan to deal with the budget shortfalls that, as you can see from that spreadsheet, is inevitable moving forward? And that spreadsheet came from the Office of Finance within the county.
Yeah. So I have more numbers to add to that nobody's addressed yet, in the tune of about $1.9 million that we're going to be shortfall just in the sheriff's office budget, not this taxpayer dollar. But, you know, we can talk about all different types of coverage for our county that's 6,200 square miles. For example, the Fremont-Wainema Forest Service has over 13,500 miles of roadways in it that we have to patrol, okay? So, and we have to respond to calls when they happen there. So there's a lot of things. If you look at the city map and the things that we provide in the city is, you know, civil papers. We provide animal control. You know, we patrol it as well. We've done traffic stops in there. You can't just drive around the city. You drive through it, just like the city police drives through part of the suburbs to get to more of the city. You know, so there's a lot of crossover there, and it's partnerships that start at the top and partnerships that go all the way down to the brand new 6-month deputy that's out there doing it. The budget that we're talking about. In 2010, when we had layoffs under Sheriff Evinger, we had layoffs, we shut down the jail, we decimated patrol. I was one of the deputies left over, and I spent all summer, day shift, Saturdays, I was the only deputy working in the entire county, okay? So I have felt that personally. And since 2010, when we set up the current policing model, we haven't changed it. And as a taxpayer, we have heard from the last 3 sheriffs that the only fix is more tax dollars. Well, we haven't changed the policing model. So changing the policing model to what I'm saying with the community service officers, taking the call loads off of the deputies for non-person misdemeanor crimes, that's changing the policing model, and that's getting the best bang for your dollar.
Okay. So how are you going to manage the sheriff's office budget while maintaining operational effectiveness? And what changes, if any, are you planning to make to accommodate the actual revenue?
Well, right now, just so you know that the Sergeants Union is in negotiations as of September 26th, and what they're looking at, what they proposed, and my opponent is one of those sergeants, is approximately a $79,000 a year pay raise per each, okay? So with the 6 sergeants, that's $1,258,000, because then you have the lieutenants coming up and your captain and your sheriff that all have to have pay raises as well. So it's $1,258,000, and then if the sheriff shuts down the second pod in the jail that he was talking about of November 1st, that's just over $1 million justice reinvestment grant funds that we're going to lose for the county. That pays for part of parole and probation. It pays for all of CPOD. It pays for 5 deputies in the jail. Pays for a district attorney, a deputy district attorney, and the district attorney investigator. It's parole and probation, treatment services, all kinds of stuff that's going to happen. I can tell you right now it's going to be catastrophic if we lose where we're at and keep spending the way we're spending and not providing a service, and then we lose $1.9 million in JRI funds and the pay raises that they're after. You're not going to manage it. You're going to have layoffs. You're going to have reduced services countywide. There's no other way around it unless you want to pay more taxes.
So what do you recommend?
Well, we need to keep the pods open. We need to not lose that $1.1 million JRI grant. We need to do that. We need to change the policing model so that we're not always saying we need more deputies, and nobody can tell us how many more deputies. There hasn't been any data collected to say we need 15 more deputies or we need 5 more deputies. Nobody knows. And just so you know, a deputy sheriff is about 110,000 FTE when you get them hired, okay? So part of the problem is if you go to the city police, you're going to make about $1,200 to $1,500 more a month just by changing the uniform. And then if you go to the state police, you're going to make $2,000 more a month. So it's hard to retain. It's hard to recruit. But when I look at KFPD and they're fully staffed on their patrol division, that tells me that we need to change something internally. So part of that is I don't want to come to a taxpayer and say I need $1.50, $1,000 more in taxes when I'm doing the same policing model that we have done since 2010, and the last 3 sheriffs have all said it's not working. So for me, I want to change the policing model. Let's collect the data to come to the taxpayer and say, this is how many deputies we need, and here's why. So to me, that's just being transparent and having some credibility in the service that we're not providing to you.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned data. How would you use new technologies like data collection and analytics to improve transparency and effective deployment of the limited resources?
Yeah, that's kind of tough. You know, we can have services in there, but data can be skewed pretty easily. I think everybody knows that. You know, so there needs to be. I'm not right now a big fan of AI, and I think a lot of it is because I don't understand it. I'm not that big of a tech person, but you know, there's a lot of people inside the county that are. We have a complete division in our IT department that could collect a lot of that stuff. So I would rely on their expertise and their knowledge to really work on how to collect that data and then putting it out monthly to or quarterly to the people.
Okay, they're telling us we need to swallow the mic.
You got to put the mic right in your mouth. It's like, yeah, that's.
All right, so let's see. How will you advocate? No, I moved ahead. How will you address the staffing shortfalls in the jail, and will you explore alternatives to incarceration for nonviolent offenders?
So I've already done that, and I've already worked with other agencies when I was the jail commander. Worked with the jail diversion. I started and implemented the pretrial release officer that monitored people when they were released. We started that. It was extremely successful. We dropped our FTA rate, according to the courts, not my numbers, but according to the trial court administrator, about 80% in the FTA rate. So that process is already in the works. The state has since taken that over, the state court system from all the other counties, and it's all in their coffers now, in their budget. But it was a program that was hugely successful. So there's a lot of things that right now that Senate Bill 48 that says who you can keep, who you can't keep in jail, and there's a lot of things that are already set out that say who can stay in jail and who can't. Well, I worked with the court judges, and we came up with that plan for the Klamath County. And I've talked to other jail commanders statewide that says, well, how can you guys keep these people in custody? Parole and probation, I worked with them, and the assistant director and I worked very closely together, setting that program up to keep his people in, to get his folks that are on probation or parole back on the books. Because if they FTA, if they don't check in with their parole officer for more than 30 days, they're off the books. And then every quarter or once a year, I can't remember the exact number, the state will come in and look at the number of offenders on parole and probation, and that's the budget that gets set for them. So we worked on keeping people coming into the jail, getting them hooked back up with their probation or parole officer, getting back on services, starting their treatment, and staying on the numbers so that it did not decimate the parole and probation budget, and which then hurts the jail budget, which then hurts the city police, state police, and whoever else uses the jail.
So for those of us that aren't part of your profession, what does FTA and off the books mean?
So failure to appear. So failure to appear rate was extremely high before we started the pretrial release officer program. And the books is who's on parole and probation's numbers. So they have, let's say they have, just for example, I'm throwing out numbers here, so don't hold me to it. I don't know what those are, but if they have 800 people that are supposed to be on probation, that's the money that they get from the state is for 800 people. But if they only have 300 people because everybody else is not reporting and have warrants out for them, well, that's the money that they get. So then you get those people back on, and now they can't provide the service for 800 people because they've only got budgeted for 300. So there's a lot of work that goes into the backside of keeping budgets going, and I will tell you that there's not an agency in Klamath County, the DA's office, the courts, city police, state police, Merrill, Malin, Burlington Northern, not a law enforcement agency in Klamath County that does not rely on the jail. The jail is imperative. It's the hub of every justice system.
Okay, thank you. So you addressed the jail, but how do you plan to address the staffing shortages in the sheriff's department, especially when it comes to attracting and retaining deputies?
You know, so there's a lot of different things. You know, we can talk about living in Klamath County and all the things that you can do on the outside. I was watching a kind of a podcast, a little news thing, and it was talking to a chief of police in a Eastern Oregon city, and he was talking about things that we have locally have never really talked about. When you're talking a few years ago with all of the laws that were coming out on use of force and you know, for example, the chokehold, carotid restraint hold, and all the implications of that and everything. There was a lot of agencies that were in the metro areas, the bigger agencies, that really felt that and really had a hard time with that. We didn't here. We have a different policing style. When you get on the eastern side of the state and the southern side of the state, we don't have the riots. We don't have the you know, people breaking out windows at the federal courthouse in Portland. We don't have that. We have a lot of people that respect law enforcement. And that's a big thing in our world. When you're a cop, then you feel that, you know, we used to be respected, and we were pillars of the community. And that's kind of gone backwards a little bit.
Not here.
Not here. And that's exactly what I'm getting at. Not here. So that has to be a recruitment tool that we can use. Not just look at all the things you can do on the outside. If you're an outdoorsman, Klamath County is a great place to live, right? But there's other things that come along with that.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the revenue that comes into Klamath County. It's often discussed that the commissioners control over a $200 million a year budget, when in actuality, they control less than 10% of that revenue, the bulk of which is property taxes. So how will you advocate from what, and again, almost 60% of the land in Klamath County is owned by the federal and state government, primarily the federal government. So how can we get the feds to, on a consistent basis, pay their fair share so the county government can provide the services that the citizens desire?
That is a lot of stuff that's outside the purview of a sheriff. But what I can tell you is that the sheriff needs to be able to spend the money that they do get in the best way possible. And I'm telling you, we've heard from 3 sheriffs since 2010 that we need more money, but we haven't changed anything. So changing the policing model to a more equitable policing throughout the county is the start. We have to do that. And then what do we need for money? Do we need $3 million? Do we need $5 million? I can tell you that from 2017, when I became a lieutenant, until I retired in June of this year, our budget has gone up every single year. It's gone up. Now, some of those things are out of your control as a sheriff. They're insurance premium costs, their workman's comp costs, their the benefit packages that come with you know, our employees, and those numbers just never change, right? So how much money are we really talking about that provides the day-to-day service of how many cars can we buy? How can we set our cars up so that our deputies are in the best piece of equipment that we can possibly get? Those are the things that we as the sheriff need to really concentrate on and try and get the best bang. I started it when I became the operations captain. We never went out for bid on our vehicles. Well, I started going out for bid on our vehicles, and we found companies that were cheaper than the way we were doing it. So that's, to me, is where we need to start really working on how do we spend our money more wisely. And I don't think we have up to date.
Okay, thank you. You know, for many of us, probably most of us, we love law enforcement. We love our commissioners, and it's uncomfortable for us to see them at odds in such a public way. as we've been experiencing for the last year or so. And and we've seen it all the way back to Evanger. So I think it's an important topic of conversation, this next question. How can you and the commissioners work together in generating more revenue for public safety from state and federal sources?
It's perfectly okay to agree to disagree. We're all adults. We're all doing a job that we're elected to do. We have to provide the best service that we possibly can with the dollars that we have coming in. We are not going to agree on everything. I've disagreed with the current commissioners on a couple of topics. And we can still talk. We can still have a dialogue that we can, hey, let's sit down, and I think that your idea is dumb. And they say, well, I think your idea is dumb. And in the end, we can both give and take a little bit and come up with the best solution. So it's not just, well, I'm going to take my toys and go play in somebody else's sandbox for a while. It's your safety. You require us to stay in that sandbox and to deal with it. And that hasn't happened, and it needs to. I've already talked to the two commissioner candidates that are going to be coming up later. I've talked to the 3 current commissioners. I've never blamed them for the shortfalls for the sheriff's office. My opponent has, but it's not their fault. They have money that they give us, and I can tell you right now, a lot of it is fighting over money. And within 2 years, Klamath County is going to be broke at the current spending. We are going to be broke. So we're going to have layoffs. We're going to, through attrition or, pink slips. But we're all in it together, and I think we need to do the best job we can to provide the best service we can with your dollar.
Okay, so you've got this map there in front of you. And we're going to talk about jurisdictional lines for a little bit. Can somebody help pass these out? So I don't have enough for everybody, and I apologize, but you'll get an idea, be able to better follow the conversation if you have this. So what you have within the red lines is the actual city boundaries for the city of Klamath Falls. I'm not in law enforcement, so forgive me for the rookie questions regarding this. But how do you guys handle calls across jurisdictions? And you can see here, I don't know if you can make out street names, but you've got going from essentially Walmart or Lake Ewana in about the center of the map, a single line that goes out to Gatewood, Ferndale, Americana. That is within the technicality of the law that requires contiguous connection with city boundaries. So that's how these other areas in the bottom right center of this map became part of the city. Are there any jurisdictional issues?
Well, as you can see, and we talked about this earlier, is that they drive through some of the county's jurisdiction to get to the city's jurisdiction, and vice versa. So, we're going back and forth. I don't think that we're all in it together. We're on the same team. It really doesn't matter what color uniform we're wearing, to me. And, so I don't, but the way it is right now, it's really choppy. What gets weird is when you're going to a call on Washburn Way and dispatch is trying to figure out if it's a county call or a city call,
Right.
And there's 2 of us standing there going, I don't know whose it is. That can get a little tough, because you want the right jurisdiction for that.
Right.
But the rest of it, I don't see it as a huge problem.
Does it have any impact at all on revenue? I mean, if a city officer should respond to a call that's outside these red lines, do they send the sheriff's office an invoice?
No, no. Just like we don't send an invoice to the city police when we go in and deal with their dogs, right? Because we run the animal control, so we don't send them a bill. We don't send them a bill when the courts tell us that we have to go inside the city and serve a city resident a civil paper. We don't do that billing.
So everything outside these red lines is in the county. I live outside those red lines, and I want to stay outside those red lines. To be clear.
Well, I can tell you that that is the urban growth boundary. I've lived outside the urban growth boundary since 1977. There's a current commissioner and I that do not see eye to eye on that. I do not want it to be inside the city. I live on a dead-end street on a water district in South Suburban Sanitation. I'm the vice president of the water district, and there's 2 houses past me, and I don't know that me having to pay extra taxes just to have a city cop car driving down my street 2 houses past me is worth my dime.
Yeah, and frankly, I would fight any effort if anybody were to launch it. It would increase our expenses by almost $200 a month just to be within those red lines. So it's not something that you're advocating.
Never have.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about crime prevention. How much time do we have left? Okay, we're in good shape. What time do you want us to stop?
6:45.
Okay. You got 11 minutes.
Hit me. Let's do it.
All right. Let's talk about resource management in rural areas. How will you ensure adequate law enforcement presence from Gilchrist to Malin, Bonanza to Keno, and all the remote rural areas of Klamath? You know, I attended a couple of forums out in Sprague, and it's a big issue for them out there, especially with the illegal marijuana grows.
Well, it should be. And it's not just an issue for them. It's an issue out of anybody outside of their urban growth boundary. We don't have any resident deputies. We had resident deputies. When we had layoffs in 2010, that was the very first thing that got cut was our resident deputy program. We had if you remember, what was called the rural patrol team. And that consisted of the resident deputies. We had a sergeant overseeing it, took in search and rescue, forest patrol, marine patrol. All those guys were under that sergeant. So one of the things that I want to do with the community service officers is take the non-person misdemeanor crimes off of the deputies. My prediction right now is about 40% of the call load is a non-person property crime that deputies go to. Now, this person will be trained. They'll know how to collect evidence. They'll know how to interview people and write reports. They're not going to have suspect contact. If there's a suspect that is established at some point during the investigation, it'll get turned over to a deputy. That happens all the time, okay? So if you're on call and one deputy you're working and one deputy's off for his weekend and he had a call yesterday that now there's a suspect, you don't say, well, hey, Mr. Bad Guy, we'll come talk to you when this deputy's back to work. Another deputy goes out there and handles it. It's the same thing. We do it every single day. So letting a community service officer take about 40% of the workload off of our deputies, what does that do? It allows our deputies to be more proactive, and they can actually work in the outlying areas and be assigned areas and not just respond to a call, handle the call, and then come back in. I have actually seen deputies on a shots fired call tell the individual to collect the brass. Next time you're in Klamath, drop it off at the office, take some pictures, and here's my email. Because they don't have the time to go out there and do it. They're going call to call to call to call to call. We need to take some of that call load off of them. My program with the community service officers will allow that so that everybody in the outlying area will have equitable policing that somebody on Homedale has.
Okay, how would you improve relationships between law enforcement and marginalized and remote communities like I was referring to Sprague, in the way that they feel?
Yeah, so this whole election cycle, all I've heard people say is, I just want to see you, right? We never see you. We never see a deputy out here. We never hear of a deputy out here. We just want to see you. So everybody in law enforcement knows that presence deters crime. We all know it, okay? So if we can go out there and show a presence in an outlying area, because Deputy A is assigned to the Sprague River Bonanza area, that's going to deter crime. People are going to start thinking, well, I'd like to go siphon that 20 gallons of gas out of that, but there might be a cop here. So if they're always looking over your shoulder, they're going to be a little worried about it. And I think that's what this community service officer program will really allow us to do, is to spread our staffing levels out to where they're not just sitting in here. When you have a deputy that's down 25, 30 reports, and he's still out handling calls for service of 12, 15 a day, that is absurd. Who would want to stay working that way when you're the lowest paid agency in the county and you have the highest call load? So when we're talking retention, those are another thing that we can do to help retain deputies. Not just say, get us more deputies. Because we've been saying that for 14 years, and it's not happening. So let's change the policing model. So that's my plan for the outlying areas.
All right, what strategies do you have for addressing gang activity or organized crime, particularly in relation to drug trafficking, violent crime, and especially illegal marijuana grows?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that we have is the marijuana grows. What comes with that is trafficking, okay? People come up and they'll work a marijuana grow to pay off a debt, okay? And they pay off the debt, or their family members somewhere else are hurt or killed, right? That's part of the debt. So the DTOs, the drug trafficking organizations, they have a business plan, believe it or not, and they expect to lose some of their gross. It's just part of doing business, right? So one of the things that you did not hear me say in who I am and what I've done is the drug team. I've been assigned to the drug team a couple of months at a time, twice in my career, to have informants and just do buy walks, and then later on, you know, we get a warrant, we arrest them. So a buy walk is I take an informant, I go up and I buy drugs from you, and then later on we identify you and we get warrants for you. Never assigned to the drug team completely. But the guy that I'm going to bring in as my undersheriff ran one of the largest drug teams in the state of Oregon. So Klamath County is a HIDA team. It's a high-intensity drug trafficking area, but we're not HIDA designated. So there's some things that you have to do that. So that's a weakness of mine that I don't know. City police, state police, they have guys on that team. We just recently put somebody on that team. But they have a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience. The sheriff's office can really up that game and help get that HIDA designated, which allows more money and it gets federal partners in. Those are things that really help with that drug trafficking thing, and it's going to help with the human trafficking that goes along with it. Right now, the drug team is chasing a lot of white dope, right? They don't have time to go after the marijuana, the green dope, we call it. So
White dope?
yeah, which is your methamphetamine, and you know, fentanyl is huge. Everybody knows fentanyl kills people. Fentanyl needs to be completely rescheduled into a different classification. It's in the wrong classification. It needs to be a felony if you're in possession of it, not a misdemeanor. Okay, so it needs to be completely reclassified. So.
Okay, what actions would you take to prevent youth from engaging in criminal activities, especially in communities with high-risk factors like poverty and substance abuse?
So we have a SRO program, a school resource officer program, it's excellent. I'd like to expand on that and get our deputies more involved in some of the drug training. You know, we used to have DARE program here a long time ago. We don't have that anymore. There's some pros and cons on that on both sides. But when you look at our youth, and we legalize marijuana, right? So we look at our youth that's watching mom and dad grow marijuana, smoke marijuana, they have access to marijuana, they take marijuana to school, they take it to their football games, they take it to their sporting events, they take it, you know, wherever. And that's a problem because they're not being educated enough. Mom and dad are doing it, why can't I? Well, because you're 11, that's for one. But it leads to other things too, right? So it leads to behavioral issues, it leads to missing school, so what does the state do? The state takes it and says, well, if a kid is truant, you cannot cite them anymore for that. That's just mean. We can't do that. If they get caught with tobacco, don't cite them for that no more. You can't do that. So we took away a lot of punishment for their actions, right? So there's a whole nother thing that we have to start, and I think that's where that school resource program could really expand and do some wonderful things.
Okay, we're going to go a little long. I got one more question I want to ask, and then his close. What steps will you take to improve or maintain high morale within the sheriff's department, especially in times of financial or operational stress?
Yeah, that's a good question. For one, I think KCPOA, our union, deputy union and sergeants union, and the employees, they need to be at the table. This is their sheriff's office too. They're the ones on the street. It's our job to support them, to give them the best tools that they need to do their job. And, you know, we work on the money part, and then we give it to them and just, you know, we forget about them. And I think our deputies need to be at the table. They need to say, hey, this is working, this is not working. Here's some ideas. They need to have a voice, and we need to listen to them. And I don't think that's been happening. And it's going to be tough. It's going to be a turnaround, and that is not going to be overnight. It's not going to be no matter who the sheriff is that walks in there and it's a light switch and it's all fixed. This is going to take years to overcome. So you got to have somebody that believes in these folks, that starts the whole succession planning, that who's the next person that's going to be the sheriff, who's the next person that's going to be a lieutenant or a captain or the undersheriff or what have you. People need to have that. They need to have goals. And it's not just who your name is, that you tag you're it because of your last name. And I think that that's going to be a big culture change to some people.
Okay. Well, that's all the questions I have time for, but not all of my questions. So is there anything that we didn't cover that you think is important enough to mention before you do your closing statement?
Well, I think just to reiterate, if the second jail pod is closed down and we lose $1.2 million, the next sheriff is not going to recover from that. They're not. Okay, that JRI grant money will go away. It's very competitive, and somebody else in the state will get it, or multiple agencies, because it's all over the state. It's not just here. There's multiple agencies that do it. And what that is that jail diversion, so that we're not sending people to prison all the time. We're doing a little more local stuff with them. So we're going to lose a lot of resources that if we lose that. So I think we need to figure out how to keep that second pot open, because when you're looking at just in your 2025 numbers, it's $5,325,744 is what the shortfall is projected, right? So where's that going? What services are getting cut out of that? So, and then when you add in the JRI grant money, that pays for 5 deputies. So that money right there is just over $600,000. So you're going to lose 6 deputies right off the bat. Now I said 5 deputies, right? That's what it pays for. It pays for 6. Here's how it pays for 6. Because when I took over as the jail commander, I went to the parole and probation director, and I said, hey, how did you guys come up with, on this JRI grant funding, because it was there when I took over in 17, how'd you guys come up with the number of deputies to run CPOD, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? Well, that's what the previous jail commander said, we needed 5. And I said, you can't run an operation for that. She goes, I agree. So she goes, you need another deputy. And I said, yeah. So then they took out of their budget, one of their parole and probation budgeted positions, and they're giving it to the sheriff's office every single year since that conversation. That's a partnership. And that partnership's going to go away if we lose this JRI grant money.
Okay. Thank you. Can you close in 2 minutes?
I can't. I can do it in 1.
Even better. 1 minute. You ready? Go ahead.
So you can go on my website, look at everything I've done, look at my ideas, what my goals are, what the priorities are, and what the plan is to achieve those. And I don't think that we're in a position to where we can have a sheriff come in and have to learn how to do all this stuff. You need somebody that can come in, hit the ground running, and that is me, and only me. I have worked on budgets. I have worked on hiring. I've worked on buying equipment, budgeting equipment, promotions. I've done all of that. My opponent hasn't done any of it yet. So he has to learn all of that. I'm not saying he can't. He can learn it. He's a smart guy. He can learn it. But I don't think that you have the time to learn that. When you're looking at $5 million in a shortfall in 2025, you need somebody that knows how to change the policing model, that knows how to adjust budgets, and to give you guys the best bang for your buck. And that is me. So, thank you. Was that a minute?
All right, well, thank you, Brian. Thank all of you for cooperating. You were very respectful, and we appreciate that. That concludes this portion of tonight's activities, and I'm going to turn it over to the Executive Director of the Chamber, Heather Harder, for our next segment.
All right, we are going to go ahead and take about a 10-minute break. If you want to come back and join us for the Commissioner Position 1 debate, we'll start back here at 7. Let's give a round of applause to Brian, Bryson, and Joseph. Thank you all.
Great time.